Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll have a SEPTA report from Lance Saber. He went to another SEPTA meeting last week, and we'll see that report. And in the second half of the show, we'll do our budget overview. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Last week was a busy week, a lot of hearings, and the mayor's budget address. So a big week. Before we get to Lance's report, just give people a little teaser about the budget address and what maybe we'll talk about in the second half of the show. What did you think?
Well, it had a lot of interesting components to it. And when you talk to members of council, particularly Council President Kenyatta Johnson, he said, we're going to take a good long look at the budget. And we're going to see where we can, mesh, where, everybody is on the same page. While a lot of what was proposed in the budget is, some decent stuff, like, every council person getting a cleaning crew for their district. I have no problem with that. No one should, because when you look at certain districts, they need a cleanup crew.
It's a good idea.
The proposal to start like an academy for municipal workers at Community College of Philadelphia. That's pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
But I can kind of tell where the problems are going to occur with this budget. One, there are no tax cuts in it. And you have folks who liked, Jim Kenney's budgets because they were slowly whittling. I speak for a living, I just don't always do it well. Whittling down the sales tax. And this budget doesn't do that. And while the business community has traditionally been in Sherelle Parker's corner practically from the moment she announced, they're not 100% on board with this because they were hoping for these tax cuts. And what she said in the news is that this is a budget that stops the bleeding in a lot of ways. And we'll probably get into the whole Kensington thing because, that's the main point of bleeding that she seems interested in stopping. And there are parts of what she suggested in that section of the budget that, folks are probably going to spend a whole lot of time in public comment, particularly when the budget hearings on Health and Human Services come up. They're going to say, this is what you are proposing isn't cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's for a first time budget, you expect, the new mayor for the first budget to come swinging for the fences. And, this may get you a triple or a double, but, this is not the Bryce Harper budget.
Right.
This isn't leaving the park.
Right.
No one's swinging for the fences here.
So we're going to talk more about that in about 15 minutes because that's how long Lance's report is. So this is from last week. We've been talking about the bus revolution since it began, since the idea came forward to rearrange the bus routes. All we have heard from the people with whom we speak, Lance going to meetings, speaking to people in the neighborhoods, they're not happy with this across the board. And at one point, SEPTA said, hey, we think we got it. We're ready to go. And people said, no. You're not ready to go. You need to hear from more people because the outreach process has been flawed. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So SEPTA is doing this again. And we published the dates in yesterday's newsletter, the dates and times and locations of these new second round of bus revolution meetings. But Lance went to one last week. So here's what he saw at that meeting. If you couldn't make it and you can't make any of these, this is a good proxy for what's happening there. So here's Lance's report.
We're asking SEPTA and the board to postpone approving the plan, which is why we're here today. The members of council have asked SEPTA to have these meetings in areas where we saw on the data that SEPTA provided, they did not have enough meetings with the community, okay? So that's why we're here today. We look forward to the continued work that will happen, and we just want SEPTA to know that we stand with the community relative to the concerns you may have about this plan. And if there's anything that we can do on your behalf, please feel free to reach out to us. But thank you all very much for being here.
You guys talking about you can walk 5 minutes, just a 5-minute walk to where I currently live. I am a half a block from the bus stop for the 18. And I moved places where there is convenience of transportation. You guys are now going to be moving it so that I'm like 4 blocks one way or 4 blocks another way. And as I had explained to you in the meeting the other day, it's very hard for me to walk. I have neuropathy, things along those lines going on, and I walk very slowly. So it's not convenient, as you may think it is, as to police the 18 up on Wadsworth Avenue and then turn it down on the Floron Avenue. We really need to do some more thinking about this. We had a meeting with Leslie about 3 weeks ago, and it kind of feels like it's a fait accompli at this point in time. That you guys are just going to be able to put this forward to the board and for the vote and then, it won't be implemented until next year, and we'll look at some other things, but it doesn't feel like that. So that's just what I wanted to say.
When it comes to the J has absolutely no amendments to that route. What you're doing is you're taking that cross-town route directly across town, whereas we're suspending the K route at Wayne and Shelton, when that is a cross-town route that goes it literally goes from East Falls all the way into the Orthodox section of the city. That is a cross-town route, and you're turning that route from a route that goes from the northwest side of the city and to the upper northwest side of the city, going into Cheltenham. It does not make any sense.
We're asking them to get off one bus and get a transfer and get on another. You can forget it. It's not going to work for senior citizens and disabled people. So we're saying to you, actually, the boil down is that look at the route of the bus, get on that bus that exists now, ride with it, see how many seniors get on. Don't go with your data. Look at human people. Get on that bus and see where they're going, because they cannot stand a route. When you say 18, you're changing that to a number alphabet. Senior citizens like me so used to the 18 bus. We get up this step, someone say, where's my bus at? The bus not going past it. But to cut it short, say this. Can SEPTA create a system which a light can be on every other pole, so not every other pole. So 5 minutes before that bus is coming down your route, a light, that bus lights up. That light lights up and lets people know your bus is on the way. Because you can't go by your schedule. God knows you can. Because we're standing there for almost forever, and the bus decided to come around the corner, and people done froze. So I'm saying, you put a system in that money you're talking about. You always say you're broke. I know you ain't really broke, but you got a figure of speech you use, you're broke. Put it where the people help the people at. A light to let you know you ain't got to stand in that corner 20 minutes. That bus, see that light come up, they come out down, oh, my bus is on the way. Work with the people, the one that's paying for the stuff to be there. Not just create things and say, this is where it's going to be. So I'm going to cut off because that's the thing they want to know.
I'm one of those folks that actually would travel from Northwest.
Bus will be eliminated.
I heard that, thank you.
Yeah, that's not right.
Also, is the 18 Express going to be eliminated?
There won't be there won't be an 18 Express.
Wow, okay. And earlier someone had spoke to us and you alluded to it, but I was wondering about the students at Girls High Central and LaSalle. Again, LaSalle coming from 1900, Central 1700, and just going up that long block and how they were going to get over to Broad Alley So those are my comments, but again, if you could address whether or not the whole city for the bus revolution is going to change at one time. Thank you.
This whole bus revolution frustrates me. Number one, I'm a senior and I'm disabled, and it's difficult enough for me to get around. The minute I turn 65, then the bus revolution decides to come, where now I'm able to ride for free and now I don't want to because I'm so confused. I have no idea how I'm going to get from here to here to here to here. And then, all right, thank goodness, thank God, that the XH is actually finally being left alone. But all the other buses that I take, it's like when you were just running down about the 18, it made no sense to me. I also take the 18. I don't understand. Am I going to be able to get from 201 Washington Lane to Cheltenham Avenue? Because you're saying it's turning here and turning off of here and turning. I don't understand. You know, and there's a couple of other routes too.
How are you going to have a meeting of the disabled and non-speaking users because they're totally confused? They don't know all these numbers, and the danger that's going to be there for the elderly, the disabled, the deaf that are going to be on these routes. The drivers, it's not their fault. They don't know sign language. But you're going to have people getting off of work, trying to go to every school. I'm not sponsoring any, but you have the high schools, Germantown Friends, Green Street Friends, you have Springside, you have all these schools and colleges down the avenue. I'm just asking, are you going to have a meeting to inform the non-English people about these changes? They do not know these numbers, and they're going to be lost. Someone's going to get hurt.
Lisa, I'm a mom of Philadelphia School District children, and violence and safety are really big concerns for me. So I know that that's not what we're here for tonight, but number one, I've just raised a SEPTA. What are you doing with the school district to increase safety of our students riding all around the city every day? Yeah. And now, by adding the transfer to get onto the 18, number one, it has increased our commute time to who knows what, because who knows how long it takes to wait for 2 transfers now. I live 1.3 miles from Central. My kid's not going to walk up Worcester to get to Central. And I can't drive him there because I have an elementary school student at another school. So, number one, increasing time and decreasing safety by having to wait at Cheltenham and Shoe.
Can I address?
Yes.
Not to do this and to take the resources to clean the buses and make them safer? Is that a consideration?
So, not exactly, but.
And I did want to circle back around to the clean and safe comments that
Well, so my specific question was, is one of the possibilities that you might recommend not to change the bus routes, but to use SEPTA's resources to make the buses cleaner, to make them safer, and to make sure we have enough bus drivers so no trips have to be canceled?
Well, so this is a budget neutral proposal. So it's the same number of service hours in this proposal as what we're running today. So there's no additional funds that we would have if we didn't do this.
To the board, the SEPTA board, what the community is saying. You're not saying you're willing to take that back. At least that's what I think I'm hearing.
We take all the feedback and adapt the network the way we hear it and the way the data puts the, to this new network.
So to make it clear, there is no way, no matter what the public says, there is no way that you are not going to make these recommendations. When the public says, we don't want it, we want you to focus on something else, that doesn't matter to you. You're going to make these recommendations with some minor changes to the SEPTA board. Is that correct?
We have heard from a lot of people that they actually want more frequent service, that they want the things, that they want more reliable service.
That's certainly not what you heard tonight. Certainly not what you heard tonight.
I heard people want more reliable service.
And again,
who do you work for, the people or the private industry? I'm not. Who are your bosses that you are not in the position to be able to take back to them exactly how we feel and what we say? Or what obligation do you have to SEPTA as opposed to your obligation to the public and to the people?
I'm getting a lot of feedback from people who say they want it. How do we, is there a way for us to see the demographics of those people that have given out those responses to you, organizations that have been pushing the drive for change? Because it seems to me like there's more, I don't know who those people are, because I'm literally sitting in on your meetings, Zoom, gone to the one pop-up meeting at the regional library here, and most of the things that I hear have not been positive. So I'd like to know, can you identify for us, even on your website or someplace else, who are the people that are saying that we really need to change this system as much as you're changing it? And let me just make it clear. It's not that people don't want necessarily any change, because we went through change before. We know that. The problem is nobody knows what you're doing. And I have gone on many buses around this city and I've asked people, do you know anything about the bus revolution? And they say no. We could do it. We could tell you what works and what doesn't work, but you're not going to get it done in a month. So if that's what your plan is, within a month or two, that you're just going to bring it to the board, you're telling us that you're not really accepting our feedback. That's how I look at it.
Who do you work
Everybody
for?
going tonight? So, let me just say a couple of things. The first is that this plan is incredibly disappointing. We met with SEPTA in our office just recently, and we met with our general manager, Leslie Richards. And one of her, her thoughts is that we had to do this. And we have to do it because we're losing ridership, and therefore we're losing revenue. And so my response is that we don't have to lose ridership or revenue, because if SEPTA is clean and safe, people will take it, and people will take it in enormous numbers. And that is not what we have right now. We can do better. We can do a whole lot better than what is offered. I was at Broad and Olney probably about 6 months ago, and it was incredibly dirty. It was the dirtiest I've ever seen it. And so what we offer our ridership has to be acceptable to ourselves. And I just think that we can do better, we can offer better, and if we do, we will get the ridership that will help SEPTA be able to maintain the routes that we know. It's easy to say, learn something new, try something different. It doesn't always work, and I think that for some folks, we may not have an understanding of just saying, well, try something different, just try it out. The level of anxiety and concern and fear that may come to an individual who is just, used to sort of like clockwork, things operating a particular way. Knowing that they can get the K-bus, knowing that they can get the 18, knowing what the bus numbers are, knowing what the routes are. These changes, particularly for folks who are very high stress, very much traumatized, very much, struggling day to day, why put an extra burden on them? So I think we can do better. I think that we should do better. I think that SEPTA can offer us a better product. I think that for the changes that are made, I don't know how many of the folks who made the decisions around those changes are directly affected. Because it's easy to say, do something different if you're not affected, right? It's easy to say what somebody else should do. But I think that we can offer our ridership so much more than we're offering, and that, again, we just have to do better. So, thank you so much.
All right, we'd like to thank Lance Tabor for going to that meeting and making that report. This is what we've been hearing from the beginning. This conversation isn't new. These comments are not new. It's good to see Councilmember Bass and Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson there taking up this fight, because that's what it is. It doesn't seem like whoever is making this decision or whoever is going to these meetings on SEPTA's behalf are hearing what we've been hearing. And when Lance goes to these meetings, he doesn't hear anybody in support of these changes. It's just the opposite. The other thing that needs to be taken into consideration here is the amount of people who may not even know this is happening still. You're not seeing a lot about this in the mainstream press. You know, you're not hearing a lot about it. And I wonder how many everyday SEPTA riders maybe don't know about this.
I would bet quite a few. And there's a difference between hearing and listening. The SEPTA folks are hearing what people are saying about bus revolution. They're hearing that people don't want it. They're hearing that people don't want their routes changed, that people don't want their routes eliminated, that there are reasons why they take the routes they take. And if those reasons have to be taken into account, they're hearing what they're saying. They're just not listening to it. And the irony is, as part of Mayor Parker's budget, there is money going directly to SEPTA from the city. And, you know, it's kind of hard to, you know, on the one hand, we know the money is needed. I was in Chestnut Hill over the weekend, and there were signs all over the place saying, you know, don't get rid of the Chestnut Hill West train, because there are people who like it. They take it, you know, to Chestnut Hill to do whatever it is they do up there, and they don't want that train done away with. And, you know, when people are telling you not to do something, and you're already experiencing a decrease in ridership, how does doing what they have asked you not to do, how is that supposed to increase your ridership? If anything, it'll do the opposite.
Right. And you know, and to Lance's point, when he asked the question, why don't you use resources to make the bus line, the train line cleaner and safer? You know, I got to be honest, I don't necessarily buy the idea that this is cost neutral. Any change you make is going to cost something, right? I would think it has to. So I don't necessarily believe that. What I do believe is that there is the opportunity to put more emphasis on cleaning the trains and the buses, maintaining them, hiring more drivers to make sure you don't have shortages in that regard, and trying to find more security personnel one way or another. Those things, I think, make more sense than a wholesale change of the bus lines. You could talk about, we need to make a couple of adjustments here or there. I don't think anybody would object to that. If you said, here's a couple of things we think would work better, I think people would be able to take that a little easier. You know, this massive change that's going to upend, I think our estimate was about 90% of the people who use the buses are going to see some kind of change. And a lot of that's significant. And we're still not seeing SEPTA really respond to this. And we interviewed the Bus Revolution team right when this started. And we were assured this is not how this would go. And now this is a year and a half later.
But that's exactly how it's going.
Yes, exactly.
And I was supposed to do a ride along with Council Member Gilmore Richardson and some other folks to one of the bus revolution meetings that was being held in Council Member Ketsi Lozada's district. I wasn't able to attend because the budget speech went on a long time and I had a deadline that I had to meet. But you have all of these meetings that are going on. They're not being well advertised, I don't think. I don't know how many people are actually going to them. If the crowd in the meeting that Lance attended is any indication, that's not even a significant percentage of the people who ride SEPTA that are at these meetings. And, you know, for something that Philadelphians use so much and has, you know, been such a big part of how a lot of Philadelphians get around, because contrary to rumor, there's not everybody's got a car. And, back when I lived in South Philadelphia, it was, fairly common for me to get on the bus and go to the shop right down the street and do my grocery shopping and go to the laundromat and go to work and do all the other stuff I needed to do on SEPTA. And I think that before they start messing with the buses and everything like that, it might be a good idea for you to start going on the Broad Street line, the Market Frankfurt L, and all of those other trains that people actually take. And I don't know, make it so when you get on the train, you're not fighting between body odors and weed when you get on the train. It might be a better idea if you were to use some of the money that you are obviously getting to do this and applying it to what people have been saying that they need you to do. Make the routes cleaner, make them safer.
So there are 5 more opportunities to hear SEPTA and make your opinion known on this. Saturday, March 23rd at 10 a.m. at the Simpson Recreation Center, 1010 Arrett Street. Tuesday, March 26th at 5:30 p.m. at the Finley Recreation Center, 7701 Mansfield Avenue. Wednesday, March 27th at 5:30 p.m. at the Deliverance Evangelical Church at 2001 Lehigh Avenue. Wednesday, April 3rd at 5:30 p.m. at Strawberry Mansion High School, 3111 Ridge Avenue. And Thursday, April 4th at 5:30 p.m. at York House, 5325 Old York Road. We'll give those addresses out at times out again at the end of the show. That's also in our newsletter from this week. We also in the newsletter have a link where you can comment on the bus revolution. Let SEPTA know what you think about not just the bus revolution, but the process if you feel so inclined. So Denise, that's what's going on with SEPTA right now. Unfortunately, not much has changed from what we've been hearing. But let's talk about something that is a change. We had the 100th mayor give her first budget address last week. And what I'd like to do first, I have a little overview. This is just sort of the broad strokes from some larger departments where revenues are coming from, that kind of thing. And please feel free to interject at any point, Denise, and let's bring up those slides. So here are the Hall Monitor fiscal year 2025 budget highlights. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. So the first thing we need to know before we get into the budget is, where does all this money come from? We're talking about a nearly $6.3 billion budget, billion with a B. So where do we get that money? Well, the first part of it is the wage and net profits tax, the dreaded wage tax that people seem to hate, but accounts for 43% of our budget. And that is the largest part of it. Next is the real estate tax. And then the BERT tax comes in after that. And then the smaller taxes. So your three biggest taxes: wage and net profits, which is almost half, the real estate tax, and then the business and income receipts tax. Okay, so now where does all our money go? Where does all that money go? And just to remind everybody, we're talking about the operating budget tonight. There's the capital budget, there's school district budget, there's the aviation budget, there's all different kinds of budgets. SEPTA budget, for instance. What we're talking about tonight is just the operating budget, the day-to-day budget that keeps the city running. So let's have a look at the next slide. And this just is a breakdown of where that $6.3 billion that we just discussed, where it all goes. Okay. One of the things that you'll find if you look at budgets long enough and you talk to people who understand these things very well, is that when you come into the budget itself, right? When you sit down, the first minute you're looking at the budget, trying to figure out where things go, a lot of those dollars that we just showed you, that $6.3 billion, are really already accounted for in a lot of ways. because you have the basic things that you need to do: sanitation, police, fire, you name it. So those things are kind of etched in stone. You know what those things are going to cost. You're probably accounting to actually spend a little more because, prices go up every year. Salaries go up every year, as they should. So these are things that that always need to be done. And you're looking at not a lot of wiggle room is how I look at it. Okay. So this is just a brief overview. It shows you that a lot of the money is going towards personnel, the people who work for the city, from the mayor to the city council to police, fire, sanitation, streets department, you name it. They get paid and they also get benefits. The city benefits package is pretty good. And I think city employees deserve to have a good benefits package. It's a good deal in a lot of ways. So you have, this is just sort of a breakdown, and we won't get into all of it, but that's how it looks. Oh, okay, Denise, I thought you were going to jump in there. All right.
Well, what I was going to say is the city is one of the few places where you can still get a pension as opposed to a 401k.
Yeah.
And the thing with personnel is the biggest part of any budget, be it the school district, the SEPTA, no matter what budget you're looking at, personnel is a big part. And as part of, this year's fiscal budget, they're actually taking into consideration the fact that you may have to give people some raises because some contracts are about to expire.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want folks going out on strike when you're trying to make the city the safest, cleanest, greenest city in America with economic opportunity for all. I hear that in my sleep, by the way.
And if you were playing a drinking game on Thursday, it probably did not end well for you.
Go non-alcoholic.
Right. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about each department, some of the major departments. All right. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to give you the name of the department at the top there, and the number next to the name is the page that this information appears on in the budget document itself, which is available on the city website. This is a good document. There's a lot of information there. It's about 700 or so pages long. I have read most of it actually at this point. So I have to go back and go over my notes. It's pretty long, but they did a good job putting it together, I think. So these are just a couple of the highlights. So behavioral health, very important department. Its mission is to educate, strengthen, and serve individuals and communities so that all Philadelphians can thrive, enjoy improved quality of life, and benefit from city services that residents can see, touch, and feel. Okay. So their budget last year from the city, mind you. Now, again, this is the operating budget. Some departments get money from other budgets. Behavioral health gets a lot of money from the federal government and state government. Okay. Their budget is over $1 billion, believe it or not. But the city's portion of that they provide is about $29 million last year, about $28 million this year. Not a huge difference there. Less than, what is that? A few $1,000s there. So not a huge difference, but again, a very important department that gets a lot of money from other sources. Next slide, please. Library. Now, this is one we talk about a lot. Everyone has been looking for better more hours for libraries, bringing in more librarians, so there's more programs. Libraries are fundamentally important for a number of reasons. And the city budget last year was almost $71 million. This year, it's almost $72 million. So you're looking at a slight increase in the library budget. Again, library can sometimes get money from other places, but in this case, city's raising it just a little bit. Next slide, please. Homeless services. This is a big one.
This is one that everybody is going to be keeping an eye on.
And this is something we have to keep an eye on, especially with all the talk about what's going on in Kensington. I think this is really important. So they provide leadership, coordination, planning, and mobilization of resources to make homelessness rare, brief and non-recurring in the city. And this is one of the mayor's big components: safer, cleaner, greener. The Office of Homeless Services works with about 75 different outside organizations, and they all sort of collaborate. They also get some money from outside. The city budget last year for homeless services was about $91.5 million. This year, in the proposed budget, it's almost $89 million.
Of course, the question that we have to ask is, if you had a $91 million budget and yet you kept coming to council for and the word is escaping me right now, for more money,
transfer ordinance.
Yeah, for transfers. Where was that $91 million going?
Mm-hmm.
And this year, well, actually for the next 4 years, now more so than ever, this department is going to get a lot of going to be looked at a lot, because everybody has decided that the folks in Kensington need to be off the street, and they do. There needs to be more shelter services. There's talk of taking part of Hahnemann Hospital, which has just been kind of sitting there, looking like a great big old white elephant for years now, and using some of that as a homeless shelter. I don't know why you don't use the entire thing, because I think that, as homeless shelters go, Hahnemann Hospital, you repurposing it for that purpose would be great, and it would take a lot of homeless people off the street. Mm-hmm. But they only want to use 75 beds. They only want to use a small space. So it's going to be interesting to see, if someone changes their mind about that. And also it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to add drug and alcohol rehabilitation to the Office of Homeless Services portfolio. Because if you all tuned into our interview that we did with council members Ketsi Lozada and Jim Harity, both of them said that the idea of getting the folks off of the streets of Kensington was to put them in a bed, any bed, not necessarily a rehab bed, but just a bed, be it a shelter bed or a rehab bed if it's available, which the city does not have enough of those. But they said that folks had to be in a bed. So it'll be interesting to see if suddenly you'll have rehab centers in homeless shelters, because that's the only way that this whole they have to get in a bed thing is going to work in a way that doesn't put people right back out on the street looking for their next high.
Yeah. All right, next slide, please. Human Services. This is another, I would say, hot button department in the past. This is the Child Welfare Agency, and they promote child safety, permanency, and well-being for children and youth at risk of abuse, neglect, and delinquency. Very important office. Budget's increasing a little bit, $500,000-$600,000. This is another organization that I believe gets money from different sources as well. Right. But also very important. So this is one of the budget hearings. We're going to all the budget hearings. Mm-hmm. But this is one we kind of have an earmark on, because I want to see what's going to change, right? What's going to be done a little differently. So I'm very curious about that. So I think that's one, if you're interested in this, that's one to put on your calendar. Human Services Committee hearing.
Especially if you know someone or are someone who has been in foster care. Far too many times, and I've done stories on some of the people that have fallen through the cracks in the foster care system. We don't talk enough about how we're going to make it so that doesn't happen. Because usually when a kid falls through the cracks in the foster care system, they end up in one of two places: jail or dead. And if we're going to spend $220 million in this budget over $220 million in this budget, in order to, if we're going to give it to human services, I'm hoping that means more social workers, that means more spaces for kids who have aged out of foster care, so they're not literally on the street and becoming a problem for the homeless services department. I just hope that in this particular case that the money is used to work toward helping kids that have been kicked around enough.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those departments where you can't spend enough. All right, next slide, please. L&I, Denise. L&I. So you're going to notice something interesting here. The 24 budget and the 25 budget are the same number.
Ooh.
That's going to happen a couple of times here, and I don't know this for sure, but my suspicion is the reason is because they may not have had a department head in place when the budget documents were due. So the budget team just said, make the number the same for now. And then as we go through the process, we can adjust it. That's my suspicion.
Now, if correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't licenses and inspections one of those departments that was split into two different things, where you have licenses and where there are functions that it used to have that it no longer has? It's been split off into another person to be the head of.
Yeah, so now it's sort of like in two pieces: the quality of life part, and then the inspection part is kind of how that's going to break down. So I believe this budget is for both of them, and then maybe in subsequent budgets will be divided. But we don't have the full picture yet, because, like I said, those numbers, when they look the same, and they are the same, it usually in years past has meant that the budget wasn't in on time for one reason or another, so they have to readjust. So we're going to keep an eye on that one. And that's an important one anyway. We've been hearing about lack of inspectors. The inspectors' jobs are very complicated. It's been explained to me that there's a multiple certifications that you have to go through to get these jobs, and some people just don't want to do it.
Right.
So it's hard to bring people in. It's hard to retain people. So this is one of those, when we talk about the police shortage, and Mayor Parker has a plan she wants to bring in 400 new police officers every year. L&I, when it comes to inspectors, probably needs the same treatment. Not to that level. We don't need 400 a year, but they really need to be thinking about how many people they can bring in to do this job and retain those people for the long term. So that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on when we see that budget hearing. Next slide, please. Parks and Rec. So, Parks and Rec, amongst other things, they run rec centers, programming, all different kinds of things for the city. Their budget last year was 86 million, 86.3. This year, almost 77.8. The decrease there, I'm wondering if some of that's going to be made up in other ways. But you're seeing a decrease in the Parks and Rec budget right now. But again, if we're talking about the clean, green, and safer, this department kind of deals with all those things, I think.
Well, yeah, and in a way, now that I look at the budget, I kind of see why Susan Slauson, the new head of Parks and Rec, was brought in. She used to be the old head of Parks and Rec under the Nutter administration, and I've interviewed her several times, and she's really sharp and really on top of things when it comes to parks and recreation. But you need someone like that if you're going to do this for less money.
Yeah.
Or do this with less money. And
that's another department where maybe it's more apparent to the average citizen when you see the parks and recreation budget maybe scaled back a little bit because that's your neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
That's your local park, that's your rec center, that's some of the neighborhood programming. So when we get to the Parks and Rec budget portion of the budget hearings, that's one I'm really interested in. I want to see how that one goes. Next slide, please. Police department. Here we go. So last year's budget, just over 878 million. This year's budget, just over 877 million. So about $1.1 million decrease. It'll be interesting to hear a little bit about that. And, you know, when we get to the next transfer ordinance, which will be in the fall after this budget is passed, right, to see if there's any more money moved over to the police department, because usually there is.
Well, you also have money coming in from the federal government with the bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Yes.
So the police department will probably get a fairly decent chunk of that, because let's face it, Joe Biden likes Philadelphia, and he always makes sure that Philadelphia gets a decent chunk of money. So that's probably where some of this is going to go. Now, what I'm interested in seeing is, are you going to get 400 new officers every year? Are you even going to get 400 new officers this year? And if you are, you know, one of the things that we never talk about when we talk about police and police recruitment, we never talk about the mental health evaluations. We never, ever talk about those. And I literally just read a story a few minutes ago about a police officer that was convicted on assault charges because he was in a bar in Manayunk, and they turned
his music
off
off.
his country music,
Yeah.
and he went off.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're also talking about lowering other standards in terms of police recruitment, not making you have a college, you know, degree, not making you have to meet certain health and wellness targets. If there is one area where you really shouldn't skimp on the standards, it's in the police department, because I want police officers that know how to read, that can understand the laws they're expected to uphold, that can actually, you know, run after a suspect without having a heart attack. And most importantly, I want a police officer who is not going to get mad and pull out his piece because I cut his country music off.
So, yes, to all those things, Denise. I remember it might have been a budget presentation from a few years ago, where the police department had a flow chart of the number of not even applicants, but people who come out for like an information session, right? And it was in the thousands. And then you go from the information session to the next information session to a formal application, then to the literacy test, psychological analysis, and the fitness test, and then to the academy, and then all the way through the academy. And it was like 43 people make it from that first pool of thousands, right? Literacy, psych exam, and fitness test were the issues. And they were trying to work out a program, I believe, with Community College of Philadelphia about the literacy part of it, which we're seeing a little bit now with the mayor's civil servant academy.
Yes.
That's being developed, which I think is a good idea. I think it's a good thing to do. So we're seeing that a little bit now. But I you know, getting the 400, right? That's not just going to be these numbers improving, or you lowering your requirement for those numbers. It's going to be paying them more.
Right.
I think that's a big part of this.
Because if you can go to be a police officer in the suburbs where you have less of a chance of getting shot at or dealing with a group of people that are, you know, selling illegal drugs, or worse yet, engaging in illegal drugs right in front of you. If you can go to the suburbs and start out at like $70,000 or $80,000 and not have to deal with what you have to deal with in Philadelphia, where I think the starting salary is maybe up to 60, which job are you going to take?
Yeah, I think it's the mid to high 50s, I think.
Mm-hmm. I've reached out to Roosevelt Poplar, the new head of the Fraternal Order of Police, and I'm waiting to hear back about him coming on the show to talk about some of the issues that are inherent in policing, and in particular, how are you going to get 400 new police recruits every year? So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, the two answers to that right now are lower the threshold for requirements, and more money.
Mm-hmm.
That's what comes to mind. Next slide, please. Prisons, Denise. Now this is going to be a really interesting budget hearing. If you're going to watch one, this might be the one. Blanche Carney is still prisons commissioner. This is a terribly understaffed department. Much like the police department, they can't keep people. It's a dangerous job, a very difficult job. And we've seen when the prisons department makes a mistake, it's incredibly high profile, because that means either somebody died or somebody escaped. And we've been seeing more escapes than you would think should happen, right? Like I feel like every time you turn around, somebody escaped.
Right.
So last year's budget, $302.7 million. This year's budget, almost $301 million.
Mm-hmm.
A little less
right.
than what it was last year. Part of that might be because there are fewer people working there. I would think.
But here's the thing: you want to take this department that's already got a problem keeping people in jail when they're supposed to be, and you want to add addicted people who will not go to rehab to this population.
Yeah.
I try not to call something ridiculous when it comes to this, but anybody who's been observing the prison system in Philadelphia will tell you that adding more people to it, when you do not have enough corrections officers and you can't keep the people who are supposed to be in there, that's a and you have like somebody who's coming down from heroin in the same cell as somebody who's up on a murder charge. Nothing good can come from that.
No, and that's one of the things that we are definitely going to have to hear about, especially from the Kensington caucus. Next slide, please. Property assessment. I threw this one up there because this has been one of those offices that gets a lot of criticism, and justifiably so. Another one of these offices where I don't know if the budget was submitted on time or what's going on with that, because it's the mirror image of what it was last year. I don't know what's happening there, because the appointment for the current director was on the table, like it was submitted, and then was held at the hearing for those appointments. So they didn't vote on it. So I don't know what's happening with that. So this is one we're keeping an eye on, not only because we want to know what's happening with the directorship, but because we want to know if they're going to do an assessment this year or next year. I think people need to know that. And, the reason why the reassessments were so high last time was because they hadn't done it in a couple of years. Well, they haven't done it in a couple of years now, right? So that one's going to be really important for a lot of people.
And let's be honest with ourselves. If council manages to cut even 0.5% off of the city wage tax, that money is going to have to come from somewhere.
Right.
And I get the feeling, and Philadelphians are not ready for this, that Philadelphians are going to start feeling like folks from New Jersey very soon.
Well,
because in New Jersey we do not have a wage tax. But you know, if folks have their way in terms of cuts, Philadelphia may not have much of one, you know, in the not too distant future either. And that money that you're used to using to pay for certain things is going to have to come from somewhere. And it's going to come from property taxes. And I don't think the people are ready for that.
no. And, you know, what if you start cutting the wage tax, what you're doing is you're helping workers to a certain degree. You're also helping businesses. And the people who aren't getting helped are the people who aren't working, maybe retired, right? Who own their home, but now have to pay more for it. That's how you're making up that revenue. So, and we'll talk about tax cuts in a second.
And also with cutting the wage tax, as much as people want it cut, what people don't understand is by the wage tax is the way that Philadelphia gets money from people who come here from like Delaware, like I do, to work, so that some of the stuff that we use, like SEPTA, like the roads, like, you know, the various restaurants and things, so that gets, you know, paid for. We pay our share of it from, you know, from those of us who are from outside of Philadelphia. And if you cut the wage tax to the point that folks want it cut, you know, we get it for free pretty much. And that's not fair to the citizens of Philadelphia that have to pay for the roads, that have to pay for the stop signs, that have to pay for construction on new office towers and different things. That's not fair to them.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Public health, very important. They also get some money from outside organizations. Their budget's coming down a little bit, but I think that might be because they're getting more money from other organizations. So going from 153.7 million to about 149.2 million. I'm going to run through them really quick, so I want to make a couple points at the end here. Next slide, please. Streets, the budget looks like it's coming down, but I think that may be a product of the fact that that has also been divided. The streets department has been cut between streets and sanitation, so I think that's what you're seeing there. Next, please. And these are all the numbers for the different row offices. You know, we'll talk more about this next week because this is an important topic. So we'll get to that. And I think we have one more slide. Do we have one more? Okay. And next week, the hearings are starting. Mayor's office on Tuesday, finance and revenue, pensions, treasurer, and the sinking fund and public testimony on Wednesday. So we're going to have that in our newsletter on Friday explaining that. The one point I want to make here, Denise, and I think you're really onto something with the wage tax cuts. Right now, the city is in the best fiscal shape it may have been in a while in terms of a fund balance, the money left over after it pays its bills. Between now and the next 5 years, at the end of that 5-year period, so 2029, the fund balance is estimated to be $14 million. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Which is why another thing that folks are talking about is whether or not the PICA board is actually going to approve this budget. Because they may look at that $14 million fund balance at the end of that 5-year plan and say, no, we're not doing that.
And I think that's really important. Before we go, I just want to thank Lance Haver. We're going to put this schedule of SEPTA meetings in our newsletter again on Friday. Check that out. And we will be back next week on Hall Monitor.